Welcome to the Black Paper. My name is Ndukwe Onoha.
And I'm Cheta.
So, Cheta, it's been quite an interesting week, hasn't it?
Yeah, very. I think the word is actually exciting.
All right. So, excuse me. What we want to do is to unpack some because we can't even unpack everything. We'll unpack just a tip of.
Not possible to unpack everything.
It's not possible. And the thing, as we've seen today, as you're still trying to unpack one, suddenly you realize that there's more. There are more packages where the other packages came from. So, Cheta, we want to talk visas and resignations. Where do you want to start?
See, I think that the right place to start is resignations because there are so many points in it for our people to learn from. But I suspect that that's going to be a very long conversation. Yeah, so I think it might just be better resignations and is it just resignations and kicking people out of the House of Lords? But let's do the other two first so that we can run over them very quickly before we.
All right, I hear you, and yes, I mean, like you, I suspect that resignations might be because it's resignations is not just is being part of a long, drawn out series. So, but anyway,
that's the word series.
The first one is the story, the sad story of a Nigerian man who was recently sentenced for murdering his ex-girlfriend. Now, Adebola, a 40-year-old Nigerian man living in Nottingham, had a relationship with his colleague at work, a relationship which was described after the fact as somewhat controlling, which is why she
went out of it.
Yeah, she decided she didn't want anymore. Now, the lady in question, the late lady Stephanie Irons, or called Steph, fondly called Steph, 23-year-old university student. She breaks off the relationship, but for some reason, Adidapo just couldn't live with the idea that someone didn't want to be in a relationship with him. So, in a calculated move, goes to the shop, buys knives, goes to her place, stabs her, runs out, tries to mask his moves, removes some of his items of clothing, ditches them, and goes to a different. Now, there's this other lady who's now in trouble as well for having or trying to
for harboring him.
And is going to go to court for trying to cover up his tracks. But eventually he turns himself in to the police and now has received a sentence of at least 25 years, but to life. It's sad, Cheta.
I think the first thing to say is God rest the dead.
Definitely.
I hope that I hope that Stephanie's family find some comfort. It's and for me, the very unfortunate thing in Dapo's behavior is, given the current political climate, there are some people who will use what he has done to try to stigmatize all of us from our community. And that is a real problem. So before we go into that, I think we must address something that's and this is not a Nigerian or African thing. It's a thing that's quite a few men have issues with, which is accepting rejection. It's something that I hope to be able to instill in my son as he grows older. Let me put it like this: the woman I eventually married was not my first love. I had a few relationships before I met the girl who eventually became my wife. I broke off some broke off from me. And for those who broke off from me, there was always, especially for one of them, and I'm being very careful so I don't reveal private information. Um, but there was one that I was really devastated about it. Now, would I have now, because of that rejection, gone out to buy a knife to kill her? No. Rejections happen. And you can, for me, I could arguably say that the Almighty was watching out for me, because when I think back, and it's interesting that these things are now more in my case, I've been married for going on 14 years now. So when you think back to those things years ago, I suddenly realized that there's every possibility that if I had married that person whom I was so crazy about at the time, I would not be happy. So people need to understand that a rejection may actually be to your benefit in a long term. Don't go about committing crimes because somebody told you she doesn't consider you good enough for her, or in the reverse that he doesn't consider you good enough for him. There's now what I would really focus on here is the gender-based violence. And we've had this issue with men from our community in this part of the world quite a bit. So when I first lived in the UK between 2005 and 2009, there was an incident that happened in Aberdeen, in Scotland, where A, the girl was a minor, and B, the relationship became controlling. So the guy was eventually sent, and I forget his name. The guy was eventually sent to jail for statutory rape, and for domestic violence. So his part of his defense was that he thought that she was 18. The girl was, I think, 16 or thereabouts. She was definitely below the age. So how she was able to be staying with him for long periods is another discussion entirely. The point is, this was a man who was he had a great job in Nigeria. He took a leave of absence in order to go for a master's. So this thing I'm talking about is 2006. He came to the UK for a master's and then got involved with this girl, a Scottish girl, and then not only was he violent towards her, it turned out that she was underage.
Minor.
Yeah, she was a minor. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is to point out the age difference between Dapo in this story and Stephanie, the girl who he killed. She was 23. Dapo was 40. That's 17 years. She was an adult, but I think it's an important point. Why? What was he doing? What was he doing? Again, there is no defense for gender-based violence, and as a community, we must be the first to condemn such an action. It's a stain on our collective conscience. I think it's important, and I'm trying to choose my words carefully because there's a family that is grieving. But it's important that to acknowledge that one individual's very horrific crime should not be used to paint all Nigerian men as aggressive or dangerous, or all African men, because there has been. I mean, we have to look at it with the with the mindset of what has been happening over the summer, going into the autumn, and now in the winter, when you had that Ethiopian guy. I think there was an Eritrean guy as well, who the migrants who committed basically sexual-based violence, sexual assault. These things, when you juxtapose these things with what Dapo Adegbola has done, it's easy for very bad actors. And these guys, people like that are bad actors, but it's easy for other bad actors. Yeah, I think that's what I was looking for, to use it as an opportunity to paint all of us black.
Mm.
So an appeal that I would make to our people is when you move country, whether you move from an African country to another African country, or you move from an African country to the UK, you are a representative of your people, whether you like it or not. There will be people who will take anything you do, any bad behavior you make. There will be people who use it as an opportunity to tar your entire community. So think of all of us.
Yeah, and that is very poignant, Cheta, because you've just said it all. When things, I mean, it's like when things happen in football, and sometimes we joke about it, but sometimes you're upset about it. Um, Black people who score a goal, they are English. If they're in part of the English team, for instance, they miss a penalty, they're Africans, and it's the same conversation we see in politics, especially now that there's an anti-migrant rhetoric coming out from the likes of Reform and their ilk. I mean, no one is saying that. How do I put it? Now, no. It's wrong, really, and it's painful that when things like this happen, apart from the grief and the feeling of condolences you feel towards the families of the bereaved, you're also asking yourself, my goodness, where is this person from? How would that affect us? Because as you've said, suddenly in the climate we are, people see the bad action of one person as representative of the whole. But the other thing I also want to talk about is, for a very long time we keep making some sort of excuses about people from our communities not uh, always being open about mental health issues, about just especially for men, about how hard it is for us to open up. And yes, on one hand, that is true. But the thing is, we need to start doing something about it. And at the risk of plugging what we're doing as the CIC I run, the CBD project, we are getting men together in barbershops to talk about mental health issues. But that is just one thing. One of the known pillars of our communities are faith institutions. I would love to see faith institutions go beyond, let's say for the church, for instance, go beyond the Sundays and the Wednesday services and go into community development, go into having conversations about the issues that people face, especially when they come here. One is the strain on mental health, but the other, because we see in the case of that, but we see in the case of even the guy, Robert Richards in Oxford, that also killed his girlfriend. In the cases of these people and other cases, there's always a controlling behavior. It starts with a controlling behavior. It starts with sometimes what you might call gender roles and how people are suddenly frustrated. If you're a migrant, for instance, and you've come here, suddenly you're finding yourself, why am I washing plates? Why am I bathing, giving the kids a bath, things that you would normally not have done in your home country. Suddenly, the reality of living in the UK, where two incomes are not even enough to sustain your household, suddenly you find that you need to contribute, and it messes with you. And sometimes people lash out because why is a man doing this? And our faith
You just
institutions.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, sorry, yeah.
you just reminded me of a conversation I had with a friend when he moved to the UK, and not long after, a family member of his came to visit, and saw him in the house helping his wife do the dishes, and that one went back to Nigeria and was like, you need you need to see a boy in the
They've turned him into
workplace.
house.
They've turned into a houseboy. And I
Boy.
think I think your point about mental health stigma in our
Mm.
community is very important because um in my view, although I wouldn't want um uh, to quote and unquote hide behind mental health, I think that Dapo is a murderer and he has been rightfully
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm not
said.
even. I'm not
Yeah,
excusing him at all.
but
Yeah.
it is important to talk about or to highlight the fact that migration, moving to a new country, brings a lot of pressures, isolation, and then in the case of people from our continent, black tax. There are these cultural expectations. I think all of us who have left our countries get calls from home routinely from people who expect just because of the relative power of the currency. I always have to remind people that even though my family is in the UK, I still earn in Nigeria, and I spend half my time in Nigeria or half my time in West Africa. But people don't, as far as people are concerned, oh, you are in the abroad, so you must be able to perform. And that in itself brings a lot of pressure. So I think the pressures that people put themselves under, which brings me back to one of the things that I brought, so that I talked about earlier. So you have this Dapo chap. He possibly started using the late Stephanie to boast to his friends, oh, I have a white girlfriend. And then when she broke it off, he couldn't live with the a small girl dumped me. I think that's so again, that goes into I don't want to use the word cultural because this is an issue with men all over. Uh, ego, yeah, that's the word I was looking for. My final point is this is an example of us for us to see about justice served versus justice delayed. It's important to point out that the British justice system worked very swiftly and brought him to book. For many of our people who come from places where justice can be bought or delayed, I mean, this is an affirmation of the rule of law. And it's a reminder to many of our people why they left home in the first place. It's something that we'll end up discussing in the topic that we've
Uh,
pushed to
uh,
the
uh,
last.
I'm sure we will. But just to finish up on my thoughts earlier, our faith institutions should look at community service as an imperative, especially for people who have come here in the past 5 or 6 years who are still going through that culture shock. They should there's a place for prayer, there's a place for Sunday and Wednesday services and all that, but more importantly there's a place for um helping people through the culture shock that they are going through right now. And our faith institutions should open their doors and say, right, today let us just look at how you can be a model citizen, or at least how you can even unlearn a lot of what you've learned at home and start relearning how to assimilate. And in so doing, don't become a nuisance to yourself, to your community, because this affects all of us, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, unlearning is a big part of the whole
It's
thing.
a big
Yeah,
part, yeah.
because we grew up. Again, I don't know how it is for kids coming up in our own neck of the woods at this point in time. Because to be fair and to be honest, um quite a bit of equity has seeped in, even though it hasn't fully taken root. But we grew up in a very macho culture. We had all sorts of bad practices that's that were associated with being a strong man, and it took when I moved here to see that some of these things were very unacceptable. Um, but again, I will still keep going back to that rule of law, that the quick justice that was served. Because a case that I like to talk about a lot was again, funny enough, again in the same Aberdeen that I mentioned earlier, a chap called Balachinda who is serving a life sentence currently. He killed a girl. Um, he basically it was a very similar situation. The difference is that this wasn't his girlfriend, this was a call girl. But the casualness with which he committed his crime and the way he behaved, even during the trial, told me, because his father was a very senior Nigerian official, very wealthy, and all of that stuff. So that thing is something that we have to also address. The impunity with which the people in our elites do things, they bring those attitudes here. And
Uh, uh,
that's what's caught up with Balachinda in Aberdeen.
mhm. And talk about the impunity of the elite. I suspect that will also seep into the. You see,
Of course,
this
we are
this
saying that
whole
the elite everywhere, the elite.
they are. So from Dakbo, let's pull out, zoom out to the wider continent. So three African countries now, namely Namibia, Angola, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, have accepted a recommendation by the UK government to accept their nationals if they are being deported. But then the question was, what were the terms of this acceptance? Because initially they were not having it, but then the UK government told them basically that, look, if you do not accept your nationals who are being deported, we will suspend granting visas to you. Now, knowing our people, I'm sure that if someone said, "Hey, well, you're going to stop granting visas to these people wanting to run, no problem." But then when they suddenly realize that, hang on, these visas will probably also affect our officials and and our business people. Suddenly, they had a change of heart. But Cheta, you are more in the weeds of transnational conversations, and I'm sure you had your ear. This probably got to your desk
Yes,
before
it
it got
did.
to the news.
It did. It did. But so there's one thing that I'm not very clear on. In rest, because my initial reaction, and I still don't have clarity on this thing, but my initial reaction was, if it's their nationals, they don't they, it's it you so a country says they don't want your nationals. Why would you reject your national? And the reason why this came up in my head was because there was also there are similar cases where the US, the Donald Trump government, has tried to deport nationals of other countries. So, as an example, South Sudan got in trouble with the US because the US tried to deport people from Congo or somebody from the DRC to South Sudan, and South Sudan was like, "Hang on, this is not our national. He's not from here." Nigeria got into trouble with the US because the US proposed to deport some Salvadorians and Venezuelans to Nigeria. Nigeria was like, no, we ain't having them. Ghana got into the US's good graces, into the Trump government's good graces, because they agreed to take nationals from other countries from the US. So the question that I still haven't gotten clarity on is, the people that Angola, Namibia, and the DRC refuse from the UK, are they nationals of their countries? Because they are from those countries, if for example, if it's Angolans, if it's Congolese, if it's Namibians, then the UK is within its rights. Basically, we don't want this particular set of people from your country. You actually have an obligation to take your nationals. Having said that, um, I think it's important to criticize the ethics of threatening all citizens, whether it is tourists, students, business people, with visa bans just to force their government's hand. It's basically that it's collective punishment, and it's basically treating innocent applicants as political pawns. That is not the way to go. Um, and I think one of the things and it's a reality that we now have to accept, is the world that we now live in, is this transactional approach towards everything. It's becoming more and more common, and it's actually become more legitimized in the so we are going into a world where international diplomacy is no longer about values, whatever those means. It's
Yeah.
now about what's scratch your back, I scratch my back. That has always been there. I think it's important to point it out.
Yeah.
That has always been there, but now it's becoming a lot more. I was trying to find a word, I can't find it. But it's becoming a lot more obvious. Obvious is not the word I was trying to find, but
Brazen.
that's brazen is a better word. Still not the word I was trying to find, but yeah, brazen is a far better word because we need to be able to look at the long-term impact of this kind of behavior. And one of the things that will be affected will be legitimate travel, legitimate business. Um, let's put it this way. Um, the fact that many of our countries have been effectively banned from entering the US now means that businessmen, people who do, I mean, it's ironic, for example, that as the US is banning so many African countries from coming, or effectively banning people from so many African countries, they are renewing AGOA, the African Growth Opportunities Act. Um, so it's also ironic that as the UK published an African strategy late last year, they are looking for friends in Africa, but they are also gingerly stepping in this direction. How does it work? Yeah, please go ahead.
I think what's here, like all things, and we've said that before. Okay, let me start from when you say speaking. You made mention of how the US operates in saying, "Look, we're just going to send anyone to your place. It doesn't matter where they come from." That is US. So it makes sense that people will go like, "Hang on, these
That
are
is
not our
daddy.
action." That's Trump daddy. The UK, I think one of the biggest conversations that happen in the UK is this thing around the rule of law and individual choice and independence. So when these countries refuse or tactically refuse to either give paperwork, I think that's what happens. They refuse to give paperwork or cooperate in providing the proper paperwork so that these people can be properly identified as either Angolan or Namibian or whatever citizens, then you can't deport them because there's no corresponding paperwork from this government to say, yes, these are our citizens. But of course, now they've been strong armed. And that is, it's not even a scratch my back, I scratch your back thing, is scratch my back how, when, and where. I want it, and I'm telling you what to do. Otherwise, your businessmen are not going to get visas, your government or your diplomats aren't going to get visas. And because they know that ultimately, what is more important to the ruling elite of a lot of African countries isn't the
That
development
isn't
of
the development of their people, but their own
but
access.
but their own access. So that is one. But on the other hand, what you've also said about the government is renewing AGOA, but then they're also doing this is you hit the nail on the head a few podcasts ago. It's the politics. Is the internal politics. For a lot of people, they want to show this is what we're doing. This is what the government has done. I mean, you see some of those tweets and or posts or social media from the Home Office, and all you need to do is remove the Home Office logo, add ICE logo. Is the same sentiment. So we're in a situation now where the removal of the migrant is what's important to be put at the front of the media ecosystem. And then at the back, where the government is saying, okay, let's see how we can normalize relationships, because we're in a media first world where through all these headline grabbing stuff at the front, we can do the grown up have the grown up conversations at the back, but we just want to throw this red meat to our base and make ourselves look like we're doing something. And I think that's what's happening. There's no more pretense of being either grown up or looking out for the mutual interest of the different parties. Right now is, how do we get our base involved, even if at the back we're doing something else entirely? And I think that's the world in which we have found ourselves now, mostly thanks to Trump.
At the end of the day, I think that in many respects, Trump is going to go down as one of the most uh, he basically changed
Consequential.
the world. Yeah, consequential. He's changed the world that we knew. And this is whether we like it or not.
Now, I think what Trump has done is to say, you know what, let's stop pretending. We've always been like this. So he has removed
So
all
you're
that.
going back to the Mark Carney speech.
Yeah, but it's what it is. Because think about it, Cheta. All the while the US, for instance, was talking about the rule of law and being the champion for democracy and free government, they were uh, overthrowing governments all over the place. So on one hand, oh, look at us, we're the light of the world. But then on the other hand, they're turning off lights, switching off all the lights in every part of, and in some moments, like in places like Libya and Georgia and all those other places, it's even choreographed in the media so that the whole world is part of this real-time overthrow of a government, no matter what you think about them. And
I mean, to quote McCartney,
we're
we
cheering.
always knew that the system was not that the system was false, but we went along with it.
And I think, Cheta, let's go for a break, come back and talk about just one of those things that everyone seems to have gone along with and how it has panned out.
No wahala.
Welcome back to the Black People. My name is Ndukwe Onoha.
And I'm Sheta Wanze.
Cheta, over to you.
What do you want me to what do you want me to say? Okay.
Because I think you're going to have more fun.
So see it up for me. Give me the assist.
All right.
Keir Starmer's chief of staff has resigned. Morgan McSweeney. It may not save Keir Starmer. So the question is, why did he resign? He resigned because a chap called Lord Mandelson, who may soon be Mr. Mandelson, a member of the House of Lords and a very influential person within the British establishment, was a major player in the Epstein files. And what are the Epstein files? I think I don't need to explain that to anybody. But the US Justice Department, just over a week ago now, dumped 3 million files for everybody to play with. And basically, everybody and their mother, everybody significant in the Western world was in there some way or the other. The thing was a massive bomb, was a massive time bomb. Of course, we know that the former Prince Andrew was there. There was Lord Mandelson. I mean, one of the most salacious parts of it was the claim by Epstein that that Bill Gates got his sexually transmitted disease from a hooker and gave it to his wife. So he had to help Bill Gates supply antibiotics so that and somebody interviewed, I think it was NPR that interviewed Bill Gates' ex-wife about the whole thing. It's basically a mess.
Is it
but
right mess?
I think one of the things that I find very interesting is that so far all the people who have been punished or who have suffered consequences are on this side of the Atlantic. Over to you before I continue.
It's quite interesting because I think for a lot of people in the US, especially a lot of Democrats, asking for the release of the Epstein files, on one hand, wasn't so much to get justice for a lot of the young, girls who were sexually molested by these shameless men, but it was a way of proving that Trump had something to hide. So even though for a lot of people again, people kept going on about release these files, we need to find out who has been playing around with Epstein and these girls. And Trump, on the other hand, was trying to do all he could to ensure that the files did not come out. It was a point of political point scoring. But what has happened, to the dismay of a lot of people on this part of the Atlantic, is that having released these files, and while everyone was trying to see how Trump will either dig himself out of it or be buried by it, the people who were being affected adversely were people who, or in the case of Kestama, someone who had not even had a dinner with Jeffrey Epstein, talk more of partying on
Who
his
was not
island.
mentioned in the files?
Who was not even mentioned in the file. So, but really, what has happened is Peter Mandelson is he had a nickname. In fact, he's that one person who has had a progressive nickname. He was once known as
The Prince of Darkness.
Dark Arts, the Prince of the Dark Arts, and then having now overcome that being a prince, he now became Lord of Darkness, which tells you that this man really has his hand everywhere. But despite all this, now, to get serious now, in a more conscientious administration, seeing someone with this many question marks would not, like someone said, would not have made him pass scrutiny to be a councillor or an MP. But then this man was made the UK's ambassador to the US. So questions.
Sorry, I want to interrupt you there, because I think it's so. Let's not fall into the trap of just there's more than enough material for talking about this whole thing for people to listen to. It's dominated the news cycle in the UK for the past week. I think what I want to do is talk about it with relation to us. There's a stark contrast. There's a big contrast between the way the elites, so like Mandelson was fired from government how many times? Yet he still managed to get back in. Epstein went to prison. Yes, he still came as he went to prison for bad actions with minors. Yes, he still came out and was welcomed back. There was something about and this wasn't with regards to Epstein, but there was something that Elon Musk wrote about it was about one racist guy that they forced Trump to fire, but then Trump found a way to get the Trump government found a way to get him back in. And then Elon Musk wrote to is human to forgive is divine. That's kind of, and that's double standard of character tests.
Oh, sorry.
In an African,
Sorry, to talk about that whole, even last, before the general elections, the man who was a Tory donor, was a huge donor to the Conservative Party, who said that saying Dan Abbott made him want to shoot her and made him hate black women.
Thank you.
You had the Conservatives all lining up to say, because I just remember because of this whole to err is human thing, you had the Conservatives all lining up to say, forgive him. He's he has said he's sorry. It's and even to come back to this Mandelson part, everyone is acting now like, oh my God, this man was such a bad man. But from the Labour Party, from the Conservative Party, even Farage, everybody thought this man was brilliant and said, yes, you make a good ambassador. But sorry, carry on. It's as you said, there's something going on for the elite, and then the rest of us have to suffer the consequences of just being normal humans.
Think about it. When we are applying for visas, the good character requirement is unforgiving. As in, you have to basically put up 10 years of your history. 10 years. Yet, a high-ranking official with links to a convicted sex offender was cleared for the top, because the top UK diplomatic post is the ambassador to Washington. As in, it tells you a lot about this, and what a lot of these guys do not understand, and this is something that ought to be clear for people from our neck of the woods, places like our country that are low trust, is that these kind of actions, and it's becoming a deluge, think about the we're in America, we're watching the collapse of MAGA. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene have left. Tucker Carlson, they're beginning to fight among themselves, and a lot of it is about erosion of trust in the system. On both sides of the Atlantic, big money has basically captured governments. Where does that sound very similar to? Nigeria. Big money owns governments in Nigeria. So when you have experts who are routinely told to respect the rule of law and British institutions, and then they are saying the architect of New Labour, so I can't resist taking a dig at you Labour people, but Peter Mandelson was the architect of New Labour. Seeing him implicated in such a scandal and seeing how he got away with it for so long, or how the former Prince Andrew, now called Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, has basically been treated with kid gloves. Imagine if it was Chukwudi Onyeokwe that was in the Epstein files. They would have been in front of his house. He would have been led out in leg irons with the media taking pictures. He would have been given a very hefty sentence. And then if he completed that sentence, as he's completing it is straight from the airports to deportation. And if Nigeria does refuse him, maybe Nigeria will say, oh, he's Biafran, he's not Nigerian. All Nigerian applicants will be threatened. It's very, very, very annoying.
It is, and I don't even know what to add to that. But the thing is, I think I guess what it also shows, if there's any compensation whatsoever from this story, is to let people again from our neck of the woods to take solace in the fact that you were not created evil, or you were not created corrupt, as people would like to. You would call it low trust, call it whatever, but people look at us and we have to prove, rather than prove competency most times, we have to show proof of not being corrupt, if that makes any sense. Because when you look at this story, when you look at how far it has gone, or rather how high it has gone in the echelons of the British political establishment. I mean, there was a story the other day, I think it was 2 days ago, about how Mandelson was given a list by Morgan McSweeney to vet potential Labour MPs. It's madness, because it just reminds me of the governor sat there somewhere in Nigeria who is vetting the list of possible Senate candidates, House of Rep candidates, State House of Assembly candidates, and if he doesn't like you, because again, sadly, apart from one short period in time, all our governors are men. If he doesn't like you,
You're done for.
But what you had is this unelected person who, because of his proximity to power, sat down with his spreadsheet and was saying, right, this person can go, this person cannot go, this person can become an MP, this person cannot become an MP. And I reading that, I just, said to myself, you know what? This corruption just goes, there is no, it doesn't discriminate. It's everywhere. If you open yourself up to it, you will get it in equal measure. So
At the end of the day, it's human nature.
It's human nature. So don't let anyone tell you that, you know what, you guys, because you are from a place where sadly our leaders have shown that they don't have any respect, for trying to hide. Because I think the difference between African leaders and the people is that African leaders don't give a damn about just doing their thing out in the open. Here there's a semblance.
To be fair, that speaks to the society as well, and I think that's something very important. So it brings us back to that rule of law. One of my favorite quotes was by Tammany, when he said, "The appearance of the law must be upheld, especially when it is being broken." This statement was made in 1843. And this chap was the MC Oluomo of his day, not Oluomo of Debut, the proper MC Oluomo. And so when somebody who is of that ilk is able to understand the importance of the appearance of rule of law. It tells you the difference between the elites. So think about it this way. You have Mandelson. He has been clearly cut out now. There's an entire, even though I don't think it's very sincere, but at least some heads will roll just to maintain that illusion of rule of law. As you have rightly pointed out, in our neck of the woods, there will be nobody will send. The only time people get punished in our neck of the woods is when they fall foul of someone politically.
Mm.
And that
True.
is a problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the biggest head so far has ruled, which is McSweeney, who was up until a few hours ago Kestama's chief of staff. Hopefully, I think where Kestama has some leeway is that by next week Parliament will go on recess, so hopefully there will be some quiet amongst the Labour MPs, many of whom are now saying, for now, many of whom are now saying, look, this man should go. Hopefully he gets some respite. Hopefully he takes back control, because sadly, the Marx, despite the fact that a lot of people had a lot of time for him, but McSweeney seemed to have taken a lot of air out of the Labour project in the past 18 months, and now there needs to be one. If I was Kestama, and if I can take it upon myself to offer some unsolicited advice, there needs to be a coming together of the different factions in Labour, especially around the cabinet table, because having just one faction, as it were, call the shots will always increase the chances of backbench revolt, as we've seen over and over. There's been so much people standing up to Kestama's authority because, again, it seems like just one wing of the party was in control of things, and this was all down to Morgan McSweeney calling the shots, as it were. Now that he's gone, I hope Kestama does the politically wise thing to bring together factions. There should be a reshuffle. I hope there's a reshuffle of the cabinet where people from different factions of the party can come round and have a truly Labour project, because we've seen the media is against the government, because a lot of the media is right wing, so they will take every opportunity to try and bring down the government. The government cannot keep setting itself up to be ridiculed and to just be trounced at every opportunity. So I'm hoping that this is a reset.
I mean, I'm hoping that Starmer can somehow survive all of this for a very simple and selfish reason. I think that Starmer has I think that Starmer has been a um a weak government. I'm not going to say a bad government. I think he's been a very weak government, especially on domestic issues. The number of U-turns that the Starmer government has made, and I think that Starmer's original sin was letting go of Sukri. She would have been a far better chief of staff. She would have, she definitely would not have allowed Mandelson to be appointed to that position. She was that much more perceptive. She was that much more professional than McSweeney. Having said all of that, I hope that Starmer remains in play for a while to come, and the reason is about our own selfish interests. Starmer leaves, there will be a round of musical chairs that will not help the Labour Party, and the demands for a general election will rise if Starmer steps out. People in the UK right now do not have the stomach for another round of musical chairs the way the Tories did over the 14 years that they were in power. You had, was it 6 or 7 prime ministers on one ticket? People are not going to stand for it. Based on UK political history, whenever there's a Labour prime minister, I mean, you had Tony Blair. you have Gordon Brown. The British don't give Labour as much slack as they do the Conservatives. It's just that simple. So
Yeah.
my my view still stands. I'm still very much I still have this view very much that if Labour can somehow hang in there until mid next year, reform reform would have peaked, and in short, reform would have started fighting among themselves
Yeah.
by the end of this year. With all the Boris acolytes that are strolling into reform now, they're basically rolling out the carpet for their guy to come, Boris
Yep.
Johnson.
Yep.
The moment Boris Johnson gets into reform, that fight will be set because Nigel Farage does not do he doesn't share power, he doesn't share the spotlight. That
Yeah.
fight will happen. But and actually it's not just for selfish reasons, not just from speaking about it from an immigration point of view. For the sake of the country, it is important that reform does not get into power. Very, very important.
Mm. And I agree with you. I agree with you that most first of all for our community, we need to ensure that a Labour government is still still in power, to ensure that that at least that people who are sympathetic to the contribution of migrants to the UK are still able to call the shots. Yes, I know. Once I said that, I'm sure a lot of people went like, Shabana Mahmood, and it's
Did you watch the parliamentary hearings? I think it's important for us to point out that the consultation for the change in
I,
immigration rules is coming to an end on Thursday.
yes.
Did you watch the parliamentary hearings?
Yes, yeah, and you see, this is whenever I keep banging on about people writing to their MPs, it's because of things like that. Because you had a lot of MPs come up to say, constituents wrote to me, or this community association. We need to, one, as Shita has pointed out, take part in that consultation, but two, continue to write to our members of parliament to let them know our strength of feeling, especially about applying these rules retrogressively. Now, if you leave Shabana Mahmood, she'll probably even say, look, people that have been here for 20 years, but we need to apply that pressure through our MPs on Shabana
Most of
Mahmood.
the talk on that was about that retroactive thing. So this is how I see it ending. I think that the route to ILR will be moved to 10 years. I think that's going to happen, but it will not be applied retroactively because
I mean,
that was
yeah, that
th-
can only happen if we continue to put that pressure on our members of parliament. But I agree with you, because again, these policies, white papers they're like the marketplace. People will come and you say your price, the seller will say, okay, no, this is how. At the end of the day, people get somewhere that hopefully you can agree on. But without that pressure on our, on our members of parliament, and maybe Cheta, we should put out a poll asking how many people have written to their members of parliament, because it is very imperative that through your MPs you put pressure on the Home Office, through Shabana Mahmood, who's Home Office Secretary, to ensure that laws, and going back to the theme that seems to have run through our conversations, Cheta, is that the rule of law. Laws should not be applied retroactively, because then we're in, for lack of a better phrase, a banana republic.
I would rather plantain republic.
Anyways, thanks for these. I don't know if you have any last words, but this has been an interesting conversation.
I mean, my closing statements would basically come. So regarding the whole Mandelson thing, I've talked about one of the points, or two of the points actually that I wrote down, which is the double standard of character tests and the erosion of trust in the system, because it's actually very important. But the other 3 points, there's the who you know versus what you do. It's a reality. Um, Many people from our community work very hard to integrate and succeed based on merits. But what this Mandelson saga with the involvement of Prince Andrew and all of that stuff, it just reminds us that in the upper echelons of the British establishment, success, and not just in short, I should stop saying the Western establishments, success often depends on networks, even if the networks are toxic, because that's what this whole Epstein thing has shown. It's a very scratch your back, I scratch my back kind of thing, and it's all about who you know. And then there was the racism thing. I mean, it was written when Epstein wrote about Trump. Epstein wrote specifically that Trump likes young girls but not black girls. I mean, when you put that into when you put that into context with, for example, the picture that he the tweets that well, not
Video,
tweets,
yeah.
the video where of the Obamas and all of that. Now, one thing that a lot of Western countries are still struggling to come to terms with is the moral authority that they once had over global
Gone.
South countries. It's gone.
It's gone.
It's gone. When they start lecturing African countries on corruption and transparency, cases like this just show that that moral standing is weak. As in, so it becomes harder for, as in, it's just tough.
Sorry.
And
Yeah,
and
Karen.
then my final point really is the fact that, like so many other issues, like the immigration issues, all of that, this is a distraction from the real issue. The real issue remains the rising cost of living. That is the fundamental issue that is taking away. So Trump released or has those Epstein files released to distract from his poll numbers.
Yep.
He's at historically record lows. And as his poll numbers continue to tank, he will go to war with Iran. He will keep okay. Well, he won't go to war with Iran because I don't think he will go to war with Iran because the Iran war has the potential for being very long, and Trump doesn't like a long war. But basically, this was distraction on steroids. That's the fundamental thing. I mean, look at how Mandelson has dominated the. As in, for 1 week, you have hardly heard any other thing in the UK media. It's a distraction.
Mm.
The real
And
issue is the fact that our bills have just gone up again.
mm-hmm. And they will still go up again. And I think when you said the thing about the moral authority, it just reminded me of something I've been thinking about for a very long time, and which is why is it when you think about it, a lot of the despots in many autocratic regimes had their education in the West. And you ask yourself, when we go to university, we'll be told, don't just go to university, let the university go through you. So you ask yourself, I used to ask myself, a while back, that didn't these guys allow the values of the West go through them? But then, as we say in Nigeria, who no come, no no. And then you come and you're sitting down and you're watching the level of whether it's how networks influence decisions in policy, or you are looking at this Manderson thing, and suddenly you realize that these guys said to themselves, you know what, these people are not better than me.
There's a friend of mine who is
So
a
I'm just
retired.
going to go
There's a
and do
friend
what
of
I
mine
want to
who's
do.
there's a friend of mine who's a retired general that once told me something. When we're talking about things like coups and all of that, and he pointed out something that has never left me. He said, "Think about it this way: everybody who ever plotted a successful coup in Nigeria went to Sandhurst.
Hmm, true.
That is the end for me."
Oh well. Cheta, it would be cool if we kept this under an hour. So what do you think? Will we be
We're on
successful
down.
in doing that? Oh well.
So it's a successful coup.
See you at the next one.